You've got the blacksmith, you've got the lumber mill, and as of last week, you wrapped up a warehouse to store all the goods. But a warehouse is completely useless if it's empty. So in today's episode, it's time to break ground on the engine that will build our town. Welcome back to week 4 of our tutorial village roadmap. If you've been following along, we just finished the logistics phase with our warehouse, which is part 3. Now we're pivoting into the infrastructure of our town. So before we can build the bridges, the roads, or even castle walls, we need stone. And I don't just mean a cobblestone generator in a basement somewhere, I mean a proper industrial scale medieval quarry. So today we aren't just going to be digging a hole. We're going to be terraforming a scar into the landscape that tells the story of industry. In this episode, we're going to cover how to carve out the terrain naturally, how to build a functional crane that looks like it can actually lift some weight, and how to texture the rock face so it doesn't just look like a chunk error in the world. This quarry is the build that supplies the rest of this series with stone. Let's get to work. The biggest mistake I see people make with quarries is placing them in the middle of a flat field. A real quarry eats down into the earth. So, for our village lore, we want this positioned near the mountains or a steep hill, ideally close to the rest of the town. I'm actually choosing this cliffside right here. So the first step isn't building, it's destruction. We need to carve out a concave shape, and we need to try to avoid making a perfect square or any pretty sharp angles. Nature doesn't work in 90-degree angles, and neither should your excavation. So I don't know if you can notice or not, but I'm actually cutting in layers here. So what I'm basically doing is I'm leaving ledges every 3 to 4 blocks, and these are what's going to work out in the end game to be your work shelves. So in a real medieval quarry, workers needed places to stand and to cart away the stone, and if you just dig a straight sheer drop, it doesn't allow that realism. And plus, it kind of looks like a glitch, honestly. So by leaving these terraced shelves, we create very natural spots for pathing or ladders or scattered debris or even, piles of tools just to lay around. Also, I want to make the floor of this quarry not flat. So just make sure it isn't flat. I know a lot of people, it kind of looks rough or they don't like to jump as they're playing in survival. But realistically speaking, as realistically as Minecraft can get, it needs to be uneven, so like broken up and stuff like this, and basically it needs to slope slightly down towards the center or towards the deepest part of the quarry, and that actually allows places where water might even pool up. So that adds depth to the quarry, and plus if you hit a cave system while digging, keep it. You can board it up with some fences or board it up with some planks or even some signs on the outside of that, on the outside of fences. And it adds to the feeling that we're digging down really deep into the dangerous parts of the world, and it kind of, adds a natural tunnel for you to go in if you are playing this in survival. So at this point in the video, I do need to point out that there's some weird kind of graphical shadowy glitch here. I don't know if it's my shaders or if it's the replay mod or what, but hopefully you guys can look past that. There aren't very many parts that really get bothered by it, but it does make it hard to sort of see the texture in some of the blocks that we're using here. Yeah, so with that out of the way, that leaves us to talk about texture, actually. So a raw stone wall in Minecraft is very boring, but a quarry wall needs to look harvested. So we're going to be using a gradient, but not the way that you would usually see it. So normally, builders put darker blocks at the bottom and lighter blocks at the top. Here, we're going to try to simulate fresh cuts versus exposed rock. So within this quarry, I'm going to texture in some stone, some andesite, cobblestone, and I'm also mixing in some dead coral blocks. So specifically the gray brain coral, but really any dead coral block will work. But they kind of have like this amazing sort of rugged texture that makes it look like raw blasted rock, or even rock that kind of has hammer marks or something on it, or even just different types of rock. So moving on past the texturing, that leads us to the crane. So every good build needs a focal point, and for this quarry, or really any quarry, it's going to be the crane. So every quarry needs a way to hoist like massive stones out of its pit and onto the wagons, and that's what a crane is used for. So right now I'm building up the base of the crane. I'm basically picking just a ledge that is sort of up higher, kind of out of the way, and that's where we're going to put the base at. So for this, I'm using spruce logs for the main supports because they look pretty sturdy. And then I decided to use the dark oak for the connection points. This basically simulates like metal banding, or like just kind of truss building, if you are familiar with that term from bridge building. So while building this crane, you need to make it look decently realistic. Obviously, as realistic as Minecraft goes. And there's 10 million ways you can make a crane. This one just so happens to be a variation of the one that was on the lumber mill. But whenever you get there, the key to make it realistic is the counterweight. So counterweights obviously, vary for however you want to use it. But if you have an arm leaning out in one direction, holding a ton of stone, the whole thing would just tip over. So on the back of the crane, I'm building this heavy sort of box with stone brick. I want this to look manufactured. Just a sort of personal preference. You can make a box back there. You can fill it with anvils. You can do stone bricks. You can just make a block of cobblestone. Whatever you want to do, it just has to look like it's heavy enough to balance out the rest of the crane. Now on my cranes, whenever I build these, specifically this variation of it, I put a winch mechanism on it. And for this winch mechanism, I use grindstones. So you can put grindstones sideways, upside down, and then you got a bunch of different ways that you can spin them from there. But it does look exactly like a pulley wheel. So on these, I'm going to run chains down from it on the outside of the crane arm, down to the platform, I guess you could call it. And then I want to run them down the body of the crane, down to the winch mechanism down there, to make it look like maybe you crank it by hand, or you have other kind of, some other kind of mechanism that raises and lowers the platform of material. Now on this platform of material, I have just coal on this one. You could add any other block that you wanted. You could use deep slate ores, you could use the raw iron blocks, you could use just plain stone, you could put chests on here, anything you wanted like that. You put gold, just whatever it looks like your quarry is pulling out, that's what's here. Now a quarry does 95% of what comes out of a quarry is going to be stone, so that would be the most realistic. I just wanted a little bit of a variation here to make it look like, they gathered up some coal and then they were taking that load out. So we have the hole, we have the machine, now we need the mess. So even by modern standards, a quarry is a pretty messy place, and by medieval standards, a quarry would have been a very messy place. So this is where aesthetic meets functional. So after you have those piles, what we need next is storage. So not the main warehouse storage, but just temporary storage. There's going to be barrels scattered around, there's chests for pickaxes and tools, and then down here at the bottom, I'm actually going to build a very small open-air lean-to shelter with a campfire. Now another thing that you need to make sure you put all around here are stone cutters. So if there's any place that a stone cutter actually belongs in Minecraft, it is in the quarry or in your base of operations. But obviously if you're building realistically, a quarry is the #1 place to put one. Another detail that you can add in here that fits in very well into a quarry is a wheelbarrow. So I have a wheelbarrow that I make very simply using a fence gate, a hopper, and grindstone for the wheel. I like to park it just about anywhere that you have space, but I would imagine they would look best next to one of those cobblestone pile of rocks, or even next to a mine entrance if you have actual tunnels here into your quarry. And with that, guys, there it is. We haven't just dug a hole, we've built an entire engine for our town. This quarry connects visually to the lumber mill, and logically to any warehouses nearby, and the blacksmith that's there ready to use up any materials and coal that is found in the quarry. Next week, which will be week 5, we're going to take all of the stone that we've just secured and put it to use. We're finally going to be connecting the village with proper roads and connecting the bridge to the town and a little bit further onto the other side. You definitely won't want to miss that, because that is when this collection of buildings starts to feel like a real town. If you enjoyed this build, drop a like, let me know in the comments. Do you prefer open pit quarries like this, or do you still prefer tunnel mining? I'll see you in week 5 though. See you later, and catch you on the next one.